Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about how to make a quantum leap. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun, this conversation. We're going to talk about self-sabotage. We're going to talk about how you can live the life that you've always wanted to live and overcome the things that hold you back from doing that. We have a wonderful guest here. David Neagle has a tremendous amount of experience in this space. He's an internationally recognized success coach, the author of The Millions Within, and the host of the Successful Mind podcast. He's worked alongside Bob Proctor, Tony Robbins, Mark Victor Hansen, and has coached hundreds of entrepreneurs to become seven-figure business owners. He's been featured in Entrepreneur, CNBC, and certainly much more with his business expertise. David, welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're excited you're here today.
I'm enormously happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And thank you to the Unfair Advantage, Maggie and the rest of the team there at Unfair Advantage. They're the reason why we're having this conversation, because they connected me to David. And I always like to give thanks to those people that support our podcast and that send us wonderful guests, because it really does make a difference. We're also excited that you're here as the listener and the viewer, because you know what? You're the reason why we do this podcast, so that we can inspire you and equip you to be the difference maker and the world changer that you're capable of being. So I trust that what we're going to talk about here today, what David's going to share here today, is going to be very valuable to you on your journey. And would love to hear your story. So afterwards, you can go on leadersoftransformation.com, reach out to me there. You can find us on social media and let us know how this has impacted you. And if you like it, please leave us a rating and review and share with your friends. My goodness, give them this information so that they can tap into the millions within and create that quantum leap in their own life and their own business. So with that, David, why don't you, you're a success coach, you have tremendous experience, but maybe just expand on that a little bit more in terms of who you are and what you do and who you work with.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, my journey kind of started when I was a little kid, with the kind of the culmination of some really bad tragedies that happened in my family, and left me asking a lot of questions that I couldn't really find the answers to. I was going to people, like I was going to my church, teachers, even family, like parents, grandparents, and stuff, and I was not getting adequate answers to the things that were happening and what they meant, and why am I taught in church that we come from a loving God, and yet we see all these people suffering. And of course, I was born in the mid-'60s, so I was very familiar with the Vietnam War and all the things that were happening around that time. So there was a lot of contradiction that was going on in my mind. As I started to get older, my parents broke up, and they really went into their own separate worlds. My dad moved across the country. My mom kind of took a deep dive for 3 years, and I was really left raising me and my brother in Chicago, and just kind of trying to figure out life on my own. So it was a very scary time for me, because I was about 13 years old, and I was having to take care of the responsibilities that really my mother should have been handling. So I was not learning how to really be a responsible person. I was not growing emotionally. And when I quit high school at 17, I got married, I had 2 children, and I found myself in this situation where I had no education, no work experience that would allow me to fulfill the responsibilities of being a husband and a father. And it was devastating to me. I mean, I was so full of shame and despair, and I was getting angry at the world. I couldn't seem to catch a break. And at the time I was working 2 jobs. The one thing I did have was a great work ethic, and I had gotten that from my father. So that, without that, I think I really would have been in a lot of trouble. But that had me working on a dock, driving a forklift. I was making about $20,000 a year, working 6.5 days a week. Right after my son was born in June of '89, so this is actually the 30th anniversary of this accident that I had, which happened in September of 1989. I was water skiing on the Illinois River with some of my family. I had been invited out to go on their boat. And I got separated from the boat, and I was sucked through the dam in Marseille, Illinois.
Wow.
And Yeah, it was bad. I was only one of two people that ever survived going through it up to that point. I don't know what's happened since. But they were very intrigued by the idea that I survived. And even though I had mildly broken my back and I had some other pretty harsh injuries, but nothing too long lasting, except for the back thing, of course, how I survived going through it. And there were all kinds of authorities there in the hospital asking me questions. And I was like, what do you mean, how did I survive going through it? I have absolutely no idea. I got sucked through it. Thank God I had a life vest on.
It's not like I had a strategy for it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You go into fight or flight mode and you're trying to, struggle for your life. But what happened that was interesting on that day was that after I came out of the dam, I went down the river about a mile, managed to grab a tree branch that was hanging over an island because the current was so strong I couldn't get to shore. And I was hanging from this tree branch. And this picture of my son's face flashed on the screen of my mind. And I just started crying. And I was asking God, please don't let me die today. And I realized at that moment, you hear stories about people's life flashing in front of their eyes. Mine did that day. And what I realized was that my problem was that I couldn't get myself to do what I should have done in order to not be in the situations in life that I had found myself in. And I made this promise to God. I said, if you let me live today, I will figure out why I didn't do that. And then I'll spend the rest of my life teaching other people how to do that. So it was kind of like you'll do anything to bargain your way out of a bad situation when you're in there. So I healed. I went back to work. I found myself back on the dock. Nothing was getting better in my life. I think I had some magical thinking going on at that time. Like I went through this, that means something. Now something's going to change, and nothing changed. And I think the biggest lesson was that life is short. We never know how long we're going to be here. I mean, it's what the biggest lesson I took away from that day was that if you're going to do something, you better make a decision to do it now because you don't know how long you're going to be here. So I was working on this dock, and nothing in my life was getting better. I was in the back of a trailer one night and had a complete emotional breakdown because I was exhausted to start off with. It was Chicago. It was February. It was freezing cold. I mean, it just was not a good day. I think I had been reprimanded twice that day for my lack of work, the quality of my lack of work, lack of quality. And this voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And it was so distinct and clear that I paid attention to it. And I said, okay, maybe there's something to this. What happens if I change it? So to make a long story short, I picked the owner of the company that I worked for. And I said, what's the difference between his attitude and mine? Because he seems to be really successful. He had a great food import company, like one of the largest in the world. And I determined at that moment that here's three distinct differences between him and I. He must love what he does because he's built this huge business, and he started in his garage, if I understand the story correctly. So he must love what he does. I hated what I did. And I walked around like confirming that in my head all the time. I hate this. This sucks. The world sucks. Everybody sucks, that type of thing. I was angry at everybody. So I was not treating people with the respect that they deserve. And because of that, I didn't care about the quality of my work. So I said, I'm going to change those three things. So I'm going to do the very best that I can and try to better that every day. I'm going to act like I love what I do, and I'm going to treat everybody with total respect. So and of course I went through the whole thing where part of your mind is going, oh, you're full of shit. Like you've never done anything like that before in your life. What makes you think you're going to do it this time? And I said, no, I'm going to do this for a year and see if anything in my life actually changes. In 30 days, my income tripled. I went from $20,000 a year to $62,000. And to try to emphasize this.
And you still were at the same job.
I actually left. So
okay.
Here's what happened. I had been focusing on how could I go from 20 to 40. And I had been focusing on this for months, trying to figure out a way to increase my income because my whole idea was I need to go back to school. But I don't have the money to go back to school. This is all pre-internet. And I don't have the time. But if I could double my income, I could get rid of some of my debt, and maybe I could figure out a way to take a night class here or there. I decide to change my attitude. An opportunity shows up that had been in front of me for 2 years that I did not see as an opportunity. I mean, literally did not see this as an opportunity, which allowed me to triple my income in a month. And I was so astounded by the fact that not only did this happen, but it had been there for 2 years and I didn't even recognize it as an opportunity. I wanted to know, what did I do to all of a sudden have that realization and to be able to step into it and actually make it work? So that caused me, who previously I was a terrible student, I didn't read or do anything when I was in school, had terrible grades, to become a voracious reader. And I would go to the library and I was starting to get books, and I discovered Tony Robbins in the early 90s. And then I listened to what he was doing and books that he read. So that led me on a journey for about 7 years of intense learning, seminars, coaches, the whole 9 yards. And I was not doing this to start a business or to increase my income, because I was actually doing okay for where I was at the time. I wanted to learn about, why did I do the things that I did, and why was I not doing the things that I should have, and why are people doing things in general the way that they are? I was looking at human potential and behavior. And so then I started making more changes, and my life was getting better and better and better. And I went from switching companies to driving another truck with this other company to actually working my way up through the company and being responsible for expanding that company across the country when I decided to leave. And people were saying to me, do you have any idea what you've actually done? Because they would come up to me and say, I don't think you realize how important and how impactful what you've done is. You don't even have a high school education and you're doing this. And so I started helping other people on the side. They would come up to me and say, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And I would tell them, and the people that would apply what I told them, which was kind of like the starting of my coaching career, they would get fantastic results. So in the end of 1999, I decided to walk away and start my own seminar and coaching business. And what was interesting about it was that because I had had these experiences of quantum leaps where my income would go up, by tens of thousands of dollars so fast, I didn't know of any other way to teach a person than how to do it fast. And they would get the same result. So that's what I started to be known for. Like, I was helping people go over the $1 million mark in less than 12 months, or right around the 12-month mark, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. But people would be astounded because they would start from like $30,000 a year. They'd be making, I have one client a couple of years ago, Marla Mattinson. She was a school teacher.
I know Marla. Yeah.
You know Marla.
Yeah.
So she was making $38,000 a year when she came to me, and we had her up around $146,000 a month within a year.
Wow.
So that, when you look at that, you think to yourself, how is that even possible that a person can do that? Well, if you do the right mindset work and you have the correct strategy, anybody can do it. So that's what I really built my career on. I've been doing it for just over 20 years now, and it's been amazing. I mean, I live an absolutely fantastic life. I get to do what I'm passionate about the most, which is help people. The vision just keeps expanding. So I remember a mentor of mine said one time, once you start to become aware of what it is that you're doing, every day gets better. You think to yourself, it can't get any better. And then it gets better, and that life could really be that way. At the time, I didn't believe it, but I believed that he believed it. So I learned a lot from him. And that's kind of my story.
That's amazing.
To talk to you.
Yeah. And what I heard in that was one critical piece is curiosity, and that awareness that you had, that self-awareness of going, even just stopping and checking in. Most people don't do that. We don't do that. We just judge things. Actually, I had a similar experience where I was in this environment, and I was like not enjoying this environment. And I was thinking, man, I had agreed to work on this project, and at this rate, I am not going to last very long. This is years ago, about 20 years ago. And And all of a sudden I realized, I was like, wait a second, what if I was to change my approach to this? And I showed up differently. When I showed up differently, everybody else showed up differently. And it was fascinating to me. I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so not that I changed them or controlled them or anything like that, but by me shifting, everybody else shifted. And I saw what I was doing differently. So really, really fascinating. I also had a client once who was the same thing, where she had this opportunity right in front of her, but she couldn't see it. It had been there for 7 years. And when she started doing this mindset work, all of a sudden she said, this person showed up and said, hey, I'd like to have lunch with you and, and present this opportunity. And it had been sitting there for 7 years, but she wasn't prepared to see it. So there are certain things that, when you talk about these 3 questions or these 3 different mind shifts that you took, are these ones that you teach, or do you find that they're different for every one of your clients? I know with her, that the strategy the approach that I used with her was different than other clients. Like in her case, she needed to create some space. She's very smart, but she had no space, like literally energetically had no space, no emotional, mental, physical space around her. As soon as we started shifting that and clearing out some of the space, she had room for other opportunity to show up. But that was her experience. That's her scenario. Then there's other scenarios which were different. So how do you help the Marlas and all the other people that you've helped? How do you help them to do it? Is it different, or is there like a...
Yeah, it is. It's very unique. Like what I teach them is all grounded in how to change your thinking based on the use of universal laws or universal principles. But I always start with the client where they are. That is the critical thing, really understanding where the client is and what are the changes that they need to make, either in their thinking or emotional processing or maturity, or even if it's the structure of their business. But it's definitely always looking at where they are and starting at that point with a clear direction of where it is that they want to go. And I get asked all the time, how do you, what do you do? Somebody comes up to you and says they want to make 10 million and you just take them to 10 million. And the answer is no. The key to making a quantum leap is a couple of things. One, on clarity of where you want to go, but why you want to go there. Very often people will pick, especially when it comes to like a financial number, they'll pick that number out of fear. And it's the fear of not wanting to have to deal with money again, because for the average person, there's a lot of uncertainty around finances in their life. If you've never really learned how to earn money yourself without the assistance of working for someone, we all know, either consciously or unconsciously, that our job is really based on whether or not the person likes us, and are we doing a good job. And it's fragile. It's a fragile thing. And money is involved in every decision that we make to some degree. So our life and the decisions that we make is very limited based on our comprehension of how much money can I actually bring into my life, and can I do it when I need to do it? Not just because, you hear people say, you better save for a rainy day, right? With the idea that there's always going to be something that happens that goes wrong, and you may not have the money at the time to take care of the problem. But what if you had the skill to create the money when a problem showed up? So you weren't living in a way where you were limiting what you really desire to do in life based on how much money you were making or not making, and you could actually live the life that you really want. So I come from that place with a person, and it's a big mindset shift at first because it goes against everything that we've been taught, which basically has a lot to do with lack. There's this understanding all over the world that there's not enough, and there could be nothing further from the truth. But as long as we believe it, then that becomes our reality. So that's the place that I start with the individual, and what is their belief system around that, and what their capabilities are. Then getting them to think about, what do you really want? If you didn't have to worry about what other people thought about the decisions that you made, because so many people are, they're really making decisions from a place of acceptance, and they want other people to approve of them. They can't stand disapproval. They have terrible fears of abandonment that come from childhood. Because let's face it, at one time, abandonment would kill us. You know, when we were infants, we needed our parents. If we were abandoned, we would die. So it's an inherent insecurity inside of all individuals. And if you had erratic parents, or you didn't have a childhood that was stable, then you have a person that is really insecure on the inside. They never know what's going to be safe, when the other shoe's going to drop, that type of thing. And then it's taking them from that place and then moving them forward with the right thinking and the right actions.
It's really interesting when you talk about money. So we in scarcity, and there was just so many, like when you were talking, I was thinking back to a conversation I had with myself a while back, where I was like, you know, I think I'm approaching this money thing in an unhealthy way. What I realized is that through seeing, you know, because we learn money habits from our parents, and I remember my parents doing well in business, and then my dad taking a risk, not having mentors, thinking that he had to sell his business to take the money from that to go and invest in something else, not realizing he could have leveraged it, right? And so he put it into something else and lost everything and more. And so, you know, it was, and then watching the interaction with my parents, between my parents, discussing money and all this kind of stuff. And I remember personally thinking, you know what, I'm going to make money and I'm never going to get into that situation again. And there was actually a little bit of pride to it, you know, because I'm not going to screw up like they screwed up. And I didn't realize until many years later, when we had a family business, which we built to, you know, 7-8 figures, and it was fantastic in the 90s or mid 90s, late 90s. And when it fell apart, and I was like, no, we weren't going to do this, right? Like this was not going to be the plan. And I was actually trying to avoid something in terms of, you know, versus seeking to create something. And it was really interesting. It was a huge aha for me when I look back on that. And then realizing the times when I actually resented money, when I thought I was trying to make it, but then I thought, you know, it's like a means to an end. People say that, right? Oh, it's just a bloody means to an end.
Yeah.
And I realized, wow, if money is if I took it as an entity and had a relationship with it, and if I resented somebody, if I resented you for long enough, you're probably not going to hang around. And so it was just really profound. So talk a little bit more, because there's a lot of commonalities, I would imagine, with the clients that come to you that go from making $30,000, $40,000, as you used the example with Marla, to making millions. What are some of the common money conversations, habits that maybe even our listeners, as they're listening, can identify with and go, oh, I think that's me. And what can I do about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things is that they're generally in a place where it's not their first rodeo. They've been trying to get unstuck financially usually they have their own business. Sometimes it's working with people that work for corporations, but they're usually independent in some way. And they've tried and tried and tried, and for whatever reason, and it usually confounds them because they're intelligent individuals.
So it actually impacts their confidence more, because they're like, I'm really smart. Why can't I figure this out? And they should get more.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they somehow or another, they'll hear about me and they'll come to me and they'll talk to me about it. And, you know, we'll often get into conversations about how they were raised around money. What are their money stories? What happened? And you hear very frequent things like your story, like, my parents had money, or they tried to build a business and it fell apart, and my dad became an alcoholic and my mom left him. And then it all gets associated with money. So one of the things that we do is we really unpack, how were you raised around money? Were you raised with the idea of, hey, you can have whatever you want in life as long as you're clear about it, you have a plan, you're going to go out and work for it? Or were you raised with the kind of idea like, don't ask for more than you need? And most people were raised with a financial plan based on the idea of need. which then becomes a financial set point in their life, but there's no number behind it. It's the perception of what they think that they need to live the quality of life that basically their self-esteem tells them that they should be living, which is usually not it's not too far away from our parents or the way that we were brought up. Sometimes it is, but for the average person, it's not.
And sometimes that's in rebellion. I have a client like that. It's like, I'm going to go so far out, I'm going to make so much money, but it's actually not because they need it. It's in a sense of what they want to do, but it's actually because they want to, it's in rebellion of what they saw. Exactly.
And those are the two ways that we set up patterns within ourselves that we adopt from our parents. It's either in direct replication or it's in rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, it's based on the same story. So, because a lot of people will say, but I don't think about money anyway the way that my parents do. I'm totally opposite of them. And like you said, it's in rebellion to them. But it is based in the same idea around the money, that there was not enough or there's a pain behind it or something. And what they don't know is invariably they're headed down a road of repeating that pattern somewhere in their life. They're so insistent that they're not until they realize that they did. And then they have that problem. So the first thing is to find out, what is the money story? What's controlling this? And if it's not necessarily a money story, is it a self-worth story? Or is it a self-love story? Or were you abused in some way and you think it's too dangerous to be seen when you make money? Because here's one of the things that we know. As a person begins to make more money, when they first do it, basically they know and their banker may know, but nobody else really knows. But if you start making hundreds of thousands a year more, or millions of dollars a year more, people are going to start seeing you different because you're going to behave different. You're probably going to show up in life different, and you're going to be judged. And if we don't want to be seen as something negative, because let's say your parents said all rich people are jerks, or they're greedy, or they don't care about people that don't have stuff. Our value system wants to align with theirs so that we maintain that relationship, that love. That's a subconscious agreement that we actually make with our parents to maintain those values. But now if I'm seen differently, there's this internal idea that what happens if I get rejected? What happens if the people that love me reject me because I'm making too much money? And I don't think that there's anybody that I've ever worked with that has not had that issue to one degree or another, that they're going to be judged by their parents, by their husband, by their wife, by their brothers, sisters, friends, when they actually start making more money, and they're terrified about how to deal with it when it happens.
Wow, that's interesting. What came up for me as I was listening, I was like, I would like to know what you think about money. How do you see it? So from the flip side, right? We know what other people think. Now I'd love to hear what you,
Yeah, so money is basically, it's just a tool. It's a tool that does two very basic things. It allows us to live a more comfortable, expansive life, because it allows us to be able to do multiple things versus 200 years ago, or whatever time frame in history, where basically our life was focused on one thing. It was the farm, or it was just working at the factory, or building the house, or cutting the wood. It gets us out of survival mode and allows our life and society itself to expand. We could have never expanded the way that we have without money. And it allows us to extend our service beyond our physical presence. So it's a tool that can do those two things in a very positive way. But really, it's a spiritual or an energetic idea that's in the universe, and it's a resource. And I see it as the third most important resource that we need for survival. So what's interesting about this is that air would be the first one, water would be the second one, and then arguably, depending on where in the world that you live, money would be the third one. I mean, food and shelter would definitely be 3, but most people don't grow or hunt their own food today or build their own homes. So money is the resource that they use to accomplish the food and shelter problem that we need as human beings. yet it's the least thing that we have mastery over.
Right.
We're not taught how to master money because very few people actually understand it. They don't know what moves money. Like, for instance, the only thing that moves money is a sale. That's it. Even more than the intention of it, because there's different intentions for money, but in order for the transaction to happen, a sale has to occur, which is an agreement of service between two people, an agreement of exchange. But if I say to you, could I borrow $20? And you say yes, that's a sale, right? It's that agreement. So we inherently learn that almost all the things around that interaction are wrong or too personal to talk about, or rude or inappropriate. You don't talk to people about money. You don't ask people how much money they make. We learn all these rules that keep us from really understanding how that works. And of course, a lot of people have a very negative view of salespeople, and they've had very negative experiences with salespeople at some point in their life. So it's not generally something that most people want to move into or learn about. But I see it as that it is the tool that I can use to expand the good that I want to do in the world, as long as I use it for a positive reason. And there's no lack, there's I forget the name of it now. Oh boy. It's a charity that provides water to people in countries all over the world where the water was so toxic that it was killing people. And the company is completely run on the idea that every dollar that you give them for clean water goes to that. It doesn't go to administration. It doesn't go to paychecks. It doesn't go to anything else. It goes to that. And then they have people that donate to help them run the company, right? So It's a very clean run charity. And one of the things that they're proving with both money and with the resource of water is that there's an abundance of it if people put their idea out there that there's an abundance. But when they were coming from the idea that it was lack, people were drinking water that would kill fish. Like it had all kinds of parasites and diseases, and they were growing tumors all over their face. And that's how this guy that runs it found out about it. And I'm sorry, I forget the name of the charity, but you can look it up. It's out there. The shift in the person's mindset was about abundance, that there's enough here if we can create the resource to do it. So the problem would be, where does the money come from to do it? Then they realized, okay, we can get money from other people, but people didn't want to give money to charities because they ran a survey and found out something like 51% of the people in the United States don't trust any charities at all. So they were having trouble. So what they did was they created a new idea about charity, and they proved that this money was going to go to for the water, for the digging of clean wells and monitoring those. And they're in like 100 different countries. They've helped millions of people, get out of this problem because there's more than enough for everyone. I come from the standpoint of is that everybody on the planet has the same amount of money, even if they're not aware of it. So it's either ignorance or it's not being aware that resource is available to them if they were actually thinking differently. So that's one of the things that I'm passionate about changing, is really changing the minds of people around money as a viable resource and learning how to bring it into their life for whatever it is that they need to use it for to make their life better or the lives of other people better.
Got it. So being that it's a spiritual, like it's an energy, that's why when you say everybody has the same amount, it's just a matter of whether or not you're tapping into it. That's really, really interesting. So when you set a goal now, or let's say even if you look back, maybe you aren't setting financial goals now, I don't know, but if at some point when you were starting to do this and it was working really well, when you were setting a goal, how are you approaching it differently to create that different outcome? Like the way that you were seeing it,
Yeah. So how, you mean, how do I do it now versus when it wasn't working in my life?
Yeah, if it wasn't working to working. Yeah, like how I think one of the reasons why people don't reach goals and actually ultimately don't even set goals anymore is because they set goals and it didn't work. But there's an underlying issue to that. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So there's two issues. One, they generally set the goal from the wrong place. Like I said before, they set it from fear, or they set a goal that they don't actually believe that they can accomplish. Part of setting a goal is that it can be as big as you want it to be, as long as somewhere internally you believe that you're going to accomplish it. If you don't believe it, then you're on a totally different wavelength with what it is that you're doing. So that's the first thing. Like when a person sets a financial goal, I'm like, how much can you actually see yourself receiving? If you close your eyes, use your imagination, what can you see yourself receiving? So they may start off at $1 million and go, nah, I can actually see myself receiving 500,000. I'll be like, okay, that's where we're going to start. We're going to start at the 500, because now we have your belief involved in this. And that's very, very important. The second piece is that the how. In other words, how is this going to happen? Whatever the goal is, we have to understand that that's not our job. That's, like, however you want to view it, it's the universe's job, it's God's job, but it's not our job to figure out the how. The how is already here. Our job is based in our number one power, which is to choose. That means that when we make a decision to cut off from any other possibility, the way or the how for it to happen begins to show up in our life in the forms of opportunity that are going to move us in the direction of what it is that we want to accomplish. So we have to make the decision, and then we have to commit to that actually happening, and then everything starts to show up. That's what kind of the answer that I was looking for. How could this opportunity that tripled my income be here and I couldn't see it? Because the opportunities are all around us all the time. In Napoleon Hill's book, in Think and Grow Rich, in the introduction, in the beginning, he's got something called the sly disguises of opportunity. And basically he says that the reason so many people fail to see opportunity is because they're so focused on misfortune and defeat that it appears disguised to them. It appears as something that they don't want. But when they change the way that they think, now the thing that they thought that was not going to be good or too risky or whatever it is, however they were judging it, shows up as something that they can see as an opportunity to move them closer to what it is that they want, or to get what it is that they're requiring for the goal that they're setting. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that's the answer. Because when I was negative, my perception was only allowing me to see other things that were negative. When I started to change my attitude to a more positive, expectant attitude, I started to see everything differently. Just like you said, people showed up differently in my life. Life showed up completely differently. And I couldn't figure out how the hell that could possibly happen. But that's what happened. So everything, all the knowledge that ever was or ever will be is 100% equally present in all places at the same time. It's here. And we have to learn how to use our mind to tap into that knowledge. And it starts off with a decision, forming a clear picture of what we want, and then making a decision. And then everything that we need starts to show up.
As I was listening to you, that's really, really good. I love what Napoleon Hill says: whatever a man or a woman can conceive and believe, he can achieve. So you have to conceive it, and you got to believe it, and then you can achieve it. Very simple yet profound. One thing that I notice a lot nowadays with entrepreneurs is they don't know how to discern good opportunities from opportunities. They're just like bright shining. Oh, maybe that's it. Because now they've changed their mindset, right? So now they're like, is that it? Is that it? Is that it? Is that it? How do you discern the opportunities that are the right ones to take you to your goal, and the ones that are just distractions? How do you really know that?
I think the best way to start to understand that is to understand that it is not the normal state for our brain to go into confusion. Our brain goes into confusion as a defense against moving forward into something that is unknown or perceived as a fear. They've done some very interesting scientific tests that prove that no fear actually comes out of the amygdala of our mind. The response that we have to survive does, but they've actually done tests where they can separate that from fear. They can cause a natural increase in blood pressure or heart rate to happen in your body when they stimulate the amygdala all alone, but the person does not experience any fear. They just experience the adrenaline rush as if they had to run away or fight something. Fear has to go through the consciousness, which means that your belief system and your perceptions have to get involved for that to engage itself. So when we're looking at all of these different opportunities and we're confused about which one that we want to take, our brain is creating confusion so that we don't make a mistake, right? It's keeping us from mistakes. So there's a fear of mistake, which means we can't get clear to see which one is the actual best opportunity to move us forward. So that's the first thing. And then it is by analyzing it there's 4 questions that I give people to ask first before they go any deeper into an opportunity. Is this something that I want to be, do, or have? Is being, doing, or having this going to move me closer to my goal or my life purpose, whatever they're after? Is being, doing, or having this in harmony with God's laws or the laws of the universe? And the law that we're looking for there is the law of more life. Does this add to my life, and does it add to the lives of other people? And then the 4th one is, does being, doing, or having this violate the rights of others in any way? And the main right that we're looking at is, does it take away another person's choice, their ability to choose? So if you have 3 yeses and a no, now you have something that you can solidly look into, Another way to do it is that, you ask yourself, am I looking at something with bright, shiny object syndrome because I don't want to do the work, I don't want to make any changes, I'm afraid that it won't happen fast enough? All of that is coming from that internal fear of that it won't happen, or I'll make a mistake, or I'll be judged. And I think that's where it starts. If you get really clear on that, you actually will look at things from the intelligent part of your personality, and you won't make those mistakes, or you'll make them less.
Yeah, that's good. David, I love this. I don't mean to grill you. I'm just grilling you with questions because I'm fascinated. I love it. I do. And having watched, there's everybody's getting into this entrepreneurial space. It seems like everybody, a lot of people getting into this entrepreneurial space. And I can't tell you how many times people come to me as a coach and they've paid for these big, expensive programs and not gotten results. Now, there's several reasons why that happens. But they're also, it's like they're doing it out of scarcity. It's like, FOMO. I don't want to miss out. I saw this guy and he gave this irresistible offer, and so I have to do that because I'll miss out on something, and it's coming from that place of fear. And then you have people that are more anxious than ever, more depressed than ever, more neurotic than ever.
Yeah.
And there's a lack of ease and grace in that. And when I listen to you and I listen to others that have been on my podcast, who I think of, May McCarthy, who wrote, should be great for your podcast, by the way. May McCarthy wrote a book called The Path to Wealth. And her recent book is The Gratitude Formula. And she's built several 7- and 8-figure businesses. She built a business to 100 million. And she teaches this 7 spiritual steps to wealth. And she talks exactly what you're talking about. It's a different approach to you don't have to have the how. God, the universe, is going to provide that how. You've got to pay attention and listen to it. And so it's really great. So there's a different energy when I listen to you and I listen to others. It's just there's a peace about it. And I know that even for my own life, I've noticed that there's a peace, there's an ease, there's a grace. And I've been in it and I've been out of it, and it feels better to be in it. Let's put it that way. So to be able to teach that to others is just extraordinary. So for our listeners and viewers, I would encourage you to go to davidneagle.com. David's got a wonderful download on his website, You Are Born to Be a Success. I would also encourage you to check out his podcast, the Successful Mind podcast, and learn more about this, what it takes to create the quantum leap. But more than that, it's what I'm hearing and what this is really about. This is about creating a life that you love and that you feel good about, more than the act of doing it. That's to get you to where you want to be. So, yeah.
If you don't have happiness, you don't have anything. I mean,
no.
That's the real key.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Final thoughts for our listeners. Oh, we just kind of gave it there, but is there anything else before we wrap up?
I think the final thought is to think about what it is that you really want in life and be honest with yourself about what it is. And then don't care about what anybody else thinks and go after it with all of your heart, because that's what you were put here to do.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. Well, to our listeners, I'm a big believer in taking action, intentional, wise action, of course, as we were just describing here. But take action on something. I always say I love podcasts, and David has his podcast. I have my podcast. You can listen to podcasts all day long, but unless you do something with what you learned, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. And so I encourage you to take something that David has shared. Maybe it's considering your money habits. Maybe it's asking yourself some of the questions that David has posed here, and just really be getting honest with yourself in terms of what your beliefs are, what your mindset is, and what is it going to take to change it. And then reach out to David. If if it's something that's resonated, reach out, get a copy of his book, reach out to him, get some coaching so that you can get on with your life. David said something earlier on, life is short, and it goes fast. And you just don't know how long you have. I know, having lost both my parents at a young age, I think fairly young, they were in their early 70s. And, you think about it, it's just like life is short. Enjoy it. We're meant to live it. We're meant to contribute to it. And so, and that requires changing our beliefs. It requires changing our habits. Taking wise action. So I encourage you that. We'd love to hear your stories. Again, you can go on leadersoftransformation.com, reach out to me there. Social media, you can find us there as well. We'd love to hear how this has impacted you, and share it. Share it with, if you've got somebody that that has tried everything and is still stuck, then share this with them so that they can get unstuck and move on. So we encourage you that. And we appreciate you and look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.
Bye, everyone.